Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking and analyzing some of the very important articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers. For reference, I'll be taking the articles from 21st of January to 27th of January 2019, and these particular articles will be from Business Line, Financial Express, Hindu, Business Standard, Live Mint. So let's begin this particular discussion. The first article is related to ENAM. Some of the very basic points that you need to understand are ENAM stands for Electronic National Agriculture Market. Second, this was announced by the central government, which basically provides a platform for the farmers to sell their produce online. Now, what was the objective with which this particular platform was announced by the government? Earlier, there is a concept of APMC markets or APMC yards, Agriculture Produce Marketing Committees. Now, these particular yards provided a platform for all the farmers or producers to sell their goods, that is agriculture produce. And it also provided a huge availability of the produce for the buyers to purchase from. In simple terms, APMC provided a platform for large number of producers to sell their produce and large number of buyers to buy as per their requirement. The main objective of this particular APMC Act was to ensure that the producers will get better remunerative prices. In simple terms, since the buyers will be large in number here, the quantity purchased will be large, the expectation was the producers or the farmers who are selling their produce in the APMC Yard will be able to earn better returns. But over a period of time, it has been seen that because of various issues which are plaguing the APMC yards throughout India, the farmers are unable to get right prices for their produce. As per one study that was done by Mr. Ashok Gulati, who is the former chairman of CSE, the farmers or producers who sell their produce through the APMC yards are getting only 25% of the prices which are paid by the final consumers in the market. I'll repeat the statement. The farmers or producers who are selling their produce through the APMC yards are only able to earn 25% of the final price that is paid by the consumers in the market. In simple terms, let's assume here is a farmer A who has cultivated and is selling his produce through the APMC yard to a buyer who basically processes it and sells it in the market. And if the consumer pays 100 rupees to purchase this particular commodity in the market, the farmer A is getting only 25 rupees. In simple terms, this purchaser or buyer B is purchasing the produce at 25 rupees and selling it in the market at 100 rupees. So the remunerative prices that are obtained by the farmers are not sufficient. To overcome this particular issue, Government of India proposed the concept of ENAM, E-National Agriculture Market, under which a farmer who is sitting in state, let's say Karnataka, can sell his produce to a buyer who is out of this particular state. Let's say from a buyer who is sitting in Andhra Pradesh or any other state throughout India. The basic concept of ENAM was the farmer should get his produce tested, that is quality certification, take this particular certification, get it listed on the ENAM platform, then multiple buyers will start bidding for this particular produce. And when multiple buyers will start bidding, the prices that are obtained by the farmer by selling this particular produce will be higher. And more importantly, unlike earlier, where the farmer was supposed to take his produce, go to the APMC yard, now there is no requirement of this particular farmer to take his produce physically. All he needs to do is get it listed on the platform. And more importantly, under the old APMC regime, the farmer was supposed to take multiple permissions or multiple fees were required to be paid by the farmer whenever he shifted from one APMC yard to another APMC yard. Now, this requirement will not be there because a single license will be sufficient for the traders or the buyers as well as the farmers to sell their produce all throughout India. That is a basic objective of ENAM. When it was launched, the Government of India basically targeted listing 500 APMC yards or bringing 500 APMC yards on this particular platform ENAM. Now the government of India has expanded the target. The government of India says by next year, that is by 2020, another 400 will be added, which will take the APMC yards which are listed under the ENAM to more than 1000. Apart from this, the government of India is also planning to link all the 7500 APMC yards or markets to this particular ENAM platform by 2022. Now, apart from this, another information that has been given in this particular article is there are around 14,500 temporary mandis which are basically dealing with agriculture and non-agriculture commodities all throughout the country. And now government of India is also thinking of connecting all these agriculture and non-agriculture dealing mandis with the ENAM platform. Now please understand, the objective of connecting all these particular mandis with ENAM is finally to double the income of the farmers. That is, this connection of mandis with ENAM will help the government of India achieve the objective of doubling of the income of the farmers by 2022. So these are some of the points given in this particular article. The next article is related to retail payments. Before looking at the points given in the article, please understand the concept of a payment ecosystem in India. Now I'm pretty sure all of you will be using credit and debit cards. Some of you will be using the concept of NEFT to transfer funds. Some will be using RTGS. Some will be sending money through IMPS, etc. All these are nothing but the part of the payment ecosystem. Again, the ecosystem is very large. I'm just taking certain examples under the concept of a payment ecosystem. Now, some of these, that is IMPS, UPI, Unified Payments Interface, NFS, National Financial Switch, these are operated by NPCI, that is National Payments Corporation of India. This was set up in the year 2008 by RBI as well as Indian Bankers Association. Now, this particular authority, that is NPCI, has been designated as an umbrella authority to take care of all the retail payments or oversee all the retail payments in India. Now, very recently, RBI has raised certain concerns or issues with respect to the monopoly that has been established by NPCI in the retail payment segment. Now, as already mentioned, all of the retail payments in case of India are overseen or done by NPCI. Now, basically, what are the concerns? That is the advantages as well as the disadvantages which have been raised by RBI in the recently published paper. The advantages that have been mentioned in this particular paper are, if there is only one retail payments umbrella system, it will take care of the standardization in the whole of the system, since there is only one entity now. Second, it will be very easy to govern or to conduct the governance over this particular entity. Having said so, certain disadvantages also have been mentioned by this particular paper. That is, one, they basically say that NPCI conducts around 48 to 49% of the total transactions in the whole Indian system. And since all the retail payments or retail transactions using IMPS, UPI as well as NFS are conducted by NPCI, there is a danger of a concentration risk. That is, if something happens to this particular data, there will be certain risk attached to this particular issue. And third, it will basically hinder any kind of a competition in the market. And since there will be no competition in the market, the kind of a systems or technology that will be used will not be updated over a period of time because there is no competition. So these are certain advantages as well as disadvantages which has been listed in this particular report or paper which has been published by RBI. RBI basically has put out this particular paper in the public domain and sought the views of the various stakeholders in the system. So these are some of the points given in this particular article. The next article is related to e-commerce. Very recently, the World Economic Forum held its meeting or summit at Davos, in which 75 countries have come together and have announced that they will start a plurilateral discussion on trade-related aspects of e-commerce. Now let's try and understand these particular points. Basically, in the Davos, the members or the businessmen around the world as well as the representative of the countries will come and hold a certain discussion. And during this particular discussion, 75 member countries of WTO, where the membership is over 160, have come together and have announced that they want to start discussion, that is plurilateral discussions or negotiations related to trade related aspects related to e-commerce. Now, what is this plurilateral negotiations or discussion? Please understand, under the concept of a WTO, you'll come across two terms. One is a plurilateral and the other one is multilateral. The major difference between both of them is that in case of multilateral, if India becomes a party to it, the points or the provisions of this particular agreement are binding on India. And whenever WTO implements a law or implements an agreement, all the member countries have to abide by the provisions in this particular agreement. That kind of an agreement is usually referred to as a multilateral agreement. Whereas in case of a plurilateral agreement, the countries or the member countries have the option of whether to be part of it or not. That is, a plurilateral agreement will be done by certain members within the whole WTO community. But please understand, these kind of agreements by default are not imposed on those countries which were not part of this particular agreement. Because any agreement which has to be implemented under the WTO guidelines, it has to be consented by all the member countries. That is, all the member countries will have to agree with this particular agreement. Now let's try and understand what are the important points related to this particular concept of e-commerce. Now some of the experts have stated that the e-commerce, the value of the trade conducted under this particular segment is more than $27 trillion. And the same has been stated even by a survey done by WTO. And over a period of time, it is expected that this particular value is going to increase. But having said so, in the recent times, some of the member countries under WTO have started to implement certain guidelines to regulate this particular e-commerce sector. The best example in this particular case will be Indian government, which recently has announced certain guidelines, or the DIPP has announced certain guidelines which are going to somewhat regulate the e-commerce sector. Now please understand, the very important raw material in the e-commerce sector is the flow of information. I'm using the term raw material because please understand, e-commerce runs on the information of the consumers. So basically, this particular flow of information is a very important raw material for the e-commerce companies. Now, what do the e-commerce companies want to achieve by having these kind of a plurilateral agreements which have got the potential of becoming multilateral agreements? The basic concept which has been said by various experts is that these particular companies want to own or have a control over this particular flow of agreements, especially those companies which are located in US, such as Walmart. These particular companies want to control this particular flow of the information and want to have a control over how they can use this particular information. They want to reduce the influence of the government on the regulation of e-commerce sector, and by doing this, they can minimize the cost of operations and increase their profit margins. These are the objectives with which it has been stated that these particular companies are lobbying for this kind of an agreement. But having said so, one thing that Indian government did in this particular plurilateral agreement or plurilateral discussion proposal was that Indian government basically stated that it doesn't want to become a member, nor it doesn't want to become an observer. Please understand this. In case of a WTO negotiations, there is a concept of being an observer country. That is, I'm not completely involved in the negotiations, but I'll just be an observer. If I find these kind of a negotiations to be fruitful and in my interest, I may decide to become a member of these kind of an agreements. Earlier, in the proposal to have negotiations in the e-commerce sector, Government of India had basically stated that it is thinking of becoming an observer country. But when this particular proposal was laid out in the Davos discussions, Indian government basically said that Neither it wants to become a member of this particular discussion, nor it wants to remain as an observer. It wants to stay away from any kind of a discussion related to e-commerce sector under this particular plurilateral arrangement. Now, some of the experts have lauded the stand of the government of India. Why? Understand this. Indian market, especially the e-commerce market, is one of the largest growing market around the world. And there's a huge potential of generating information related to this kind of a market or this kind of a sector, that is e-commerce. Now, government of India, by staying away from any kind of a negotiations related to this, is trying to say that they want to regulate which kind of e-commerce companies will be set up in India. They want to regulate what kind of an information will flow into India and out of India. For a simple reason, Indian companies have been found to be lacking in terms of competing with the foreign e-commerce companies. And over a period of time, if the foreign e-commerce companies become the leader and Indian e-commerce companies are out of the business, then the foreign companies will start owning this particular information that will be generated through e-commerce sector. Then India may end up becoming a consumer of these particular products rather than being a controller or generator of this particular information. That is the fear of government of India. And government of India has basically stated that if they can control how this particular information can be used, where it has to be stored, how it can be used up, who will control this particular information, so on and so forth, they can even promote the domestic startups in the e-commerce sector. Keeping in mind these particular objectives, government of India has denied being an even observer in these particular negotiations related to e-commerce. So this is the gist of this article. The next article is related to Kalia scheme. This particular scheme has been announced by Odisha government. Now, very recently, two schemes related to agriculture sector which are there in the newspapers are one, Kalia scheme announced by Odisha government, and the second one is Raitu Bandhu scheme announced by Telangana government. Let's look at some of the very important points related to Kalia scheme. One, it was announced by Odisha government as already mentioned. Second, under this particular scheme, assistance or a cash assistance will be provided to the farmers. And this particular scheme will be implemented till financial year 2022. So under this particular scheme, assistance of 5,000 rupees will be provided to the farmers before the Kharif season as well as before the Rabi season. So for the next 5 cropping seasons, that is Kharif as well as Rabi, the farmers will be given a cash assistance of 5,000 rupees. Apart from this, landless laborers will be provided with an one-time assistance of 12,500 rupees. Next, under this, a cash assistance of 10,000 rupees has been proposed to all the households which are having elderly people. But please understand, as of now, this particular component has not been launched. It will be launched in the coming days. Next, under this particular scheme, crop loans of up to 50,000 rupees will be interest free. Apart from this, the government also has announced an accidental insurance coverage, that is personal accidental insurance coverage of 2 lakh rupees and a life insurance coverage of 2 lakh rupees. So these are some of the points or important points related to the Kalia scheme which has been announced by Odisha government. The next article is related to the debt to GDP ratio of the center as well as the states. Now please understand, there is already a committee recommendation, that is NPCI committee, which has recommended that the debt to GDP ratio of the central government as well as the state government, which cumulatively is around 70%, should be brought down to 60%, of which the central government debt to GDP ratio should be 40% and of the states should be 20%. This particular article discusses the debt to GDP ratio of the center as well as the states. What this article basically says is, between financial year 14 to financial year 18, the debt to GDP ratio of the central government has come down from 47.5% to 46.5%. Whereas on the other side, the debt to GDP ratio of the states has increased from 22% to 24%, which is a trend which is going against the recommendation given by the NK Singh committee. Now, one of the reasons which has been cited in this particular article as to why this particular debt to GDP ratio of the states has increased has been the issue of Uday bonds. The issue of Uday bonds, which was done under Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana to take care of the financial health of the discoms, has led to ballooning or increase of the fiscal deficit of the states, as a result of which the debt to GDP ratio of the states also has increased. Now, what is the danger if the debt to GDP ratio increases? The debt to GDP ratio, if it is higher and higher, at one point of a time, the state may end up in a debt trap. What is this concept of state falling into a debt trap? That is, a state will borrow from the market to repay the debt which is already existing. So that is the danger of increasing debt to GDP ratio, either for the central government as well as the state government. Apart from the danger of falling into a debt trap, what is another issue with respect to this higher debt to GDP ratio of the states is that the central government will have sufficient or more than enough financial resources. That is, it has got the right to impose a higher income tax rate and collect more income taxes. It has got many other sources to collect the revenue or the receipts to ensure that it can drag down the debt to GDP ratio. In the same way, states do not have sufficient financial resources to drag down this particular debt to GDP ratio whenever they want to. That is one issue. And the second issue has been that the fiscal deficit of the states has been higher than 3% in this particular fiscal, and it is expected to reach 3.2% in the next fiscal, that is fiscal year 2020, which is again higher than the recommendation given by FRBM committee, which basically stated that this particular fiscal deficit should be up to 3% in case of the center as well as the states. So these are some of the points which are given in this particular article. The next article is related to public sector units. Please understand, within the public sector units, there will be certain PSUs which are owned by the central government, which are famously referred to as CPSEs, Central Public Sector Enterprises. In the same way, the states will also own some of these particular units which are referred to as SPSUs, Central Public Sector Units. Now, what are the numbers related to the PSUs? In case of the central government owns 444 PSUs, whereas the state government owns more than 1130 PSUs. To be more precise, 1136 PSUs. But more importantly, the central government PSUs generate a lot of jobs, generate a lot of revenues. The data which has been given here basically states that the central PSUs for the financial year 2016 and 2016 generated profits of 1.3 lakh crore rupees and added to the revenues of the central government by 3.86 lakh crore rupees in the form of taxation receipts, in the form of dividends, so on and so forth. Whereas in case of the state PSUs, which are more than 1130, that is, to be more precise, 1136 PSUs, this particular article says that they have had a loss of around 84,000 crore rupees. Again, for the financial year 17, a loss of 84,000 crore rupees, despite having a huge number of employment base, that is 17.3 lakh people, and the accumulated losses of the state PSUs has been more than 4.6 lakh crore rupees. Now, many times we discuss about the central government exiting the loss-making CPSEs. This particular article makes a case of the state governments exiting the loss-making SPSUs. Now, what is the advantage of a state government exiting these SPSUs? One, the state government will keep on paying the salaries of these particular employees. That particular expenditure and other related expenditure will come down. And when the state government does not have to incur this expenditure, same money can be invested somewhere else. Third, if this particular PSU, that is SPSU, is unable to compete, shut it down or sell it off to a private sector. And when a private sector investor or company buys this particular PSU, again the state government will generate revenues. So it's a win-win situation for all the stakeholders who are present in this particular system. And that is the precise reason this particular article makes a compelling argument to rationalize the state PSUs. Some of the other arguments which have been put forward in this particular article are: 1. The state government has kept on opening up the PSUs in as many sectors as possible. Some of the sectors which have been listed are fishery, poultry, livestock, sugarcane, housing, small industries, welfare corporation, so on and so forth. The argument simply is the state government doesn't have that kind of an expertise to set up PSUs or to maintain the functions in all these particular sectors. That is one argument. Second, many of the times these particular state PSUs have become a source of posting the bureaucrats who are aged. Third, certain welfare PSUs give loans to people who are belonging to certain communities. And again, these particular PSUs borrow from the state government or financed by the state government. The article basically states that these kind of a targeted lending to these particular communities can be best done through the banking system itself rather than targeting through these particular welfare PSUs. So these are some of the issues which have been flagged with respect to functioning of the state public sector units. Finally, what is the way forward? This particular article says that the kind of rationalization that was done in countries such as Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, wherein certain mechanisms were implemented so as to shield these particular PSUs from being used politically or from politicization of these particular PSUs. That has been recommended in this particular article. Now let's look at some of the questions. Question number 1, consider the following statements. NPCI has been set up under the Section 8 of Companies Act of 1956. Now please understand, under the concept of Companies Act, there is a concept of a not-for-profit organization or not-for-profit entity. Under the old Companies Act of 1956, the section that dealt with the non-profit or not-for-profit organization was Section 25. And as per the Companies Act of 2013, the section that deals with not-for-profit organization is Section 8. The first statement with respect to NPCI is related to that it is set up under the Section 8 of Companies Act of 1956. No, it is Section 8 of Companies Act of 2013, or else you can simply say Section 25 of Companies Act of 1956. So the first statement is wrong. Second statement, RBI is the umbrella organization for operating retail payment systems. No, in case of India, it is not RBI, it is NPCI. So even the second statement is wrong. Right option will be option D, both are false. Second question, which of the following are operated by NPCI? NFS, National Financial Switch, UPI, Unified Payments Interface, RuPay is a financial intermediary. So all the three are operated by NPCI. So the right option will be option D, 1, 2 and 3. Question number 3, despite being a high savings economy, capital formation may not result in the significant increase in the output due to. Please understand, this particular question I've picked up because we are about to head towards the announcement of the budget. So during the budget, there will be discussion of a concept of ICAR, incremental capital output ratio. What is the concept of a capital output ratio? It basically is nothing but how much extra capital should be invested to get one extra unit of output. I'll repeat it. How much extra investment has to be done in the form of a capital to get extra 1 unit of output. And logically speaking, you want to decrease this particular ICAR value because to produce 1 unit of output, lower the investment, efficient is the production. So ICAR value should come down. So basically this particular question is connecting the capital formation, the savings in the economy as well as the increase in the output. Despite having higher savings, which will lead to higher capital formation, if the output doesn't increase, it simply means that the capital output ratio is very high. That is, for producing 1 extra unit of output, I am investing very high amount. Since I am investing higher amount, even despite having higher savings, this will not lead to higher growth. So the right option will be option D, high capital output ratio. Consider the following statements. This is related to FRBM Review Act or FRBM Review Committee, that is NK Singh Committee recommendations. Let's look at the points here. The FRBM Review Committee report has recommended a debt to GDP ratio of 60% for the general or combined government by 2023, comprising 40% of the central government and 20% for the state governments. I've already looked into this. This is the right point. Second, the central government has the domestic liability of 21%, of GDP as compared to that of 49% of GDP of the state government. This is wrong. In fact, it is vice versa. The central government earlier was 49%. As we have seen in this particular discussion, it has come down to around 46.5% as per the latest numbers. So this is a wrong statement. So right option will be option A, that is the first statement only. So these are some of the questions as well as the articles related to this particular week. Thank you. Have a good day.